No. Right in the video there because satisfying. So let's go more into this topic. People love saying the game needs a remake, everything needs a remake, or requires a remake, deserves a remake. Nothing actually needs or deserves a remake. It is you wanting a remake, and there's nothing wrong with that. Good for you wanting a remake. There kids, I want a remake. I want Final Fantasy V, a 3D remake, akin to Final Fantasy IV 3D remake. But that's me wanting it. Final Fantasy V doesn't need it. Final Fantasy V is great as is. But many people keep thinking games need a remake, and the reasonings tend to be always specifically for more personal reason, rather than anything that quote unquote needs it. Let's go with the big one out of the way. Final Fantasy VII Remake. Many people said, oh, Final Fantasy VII needs a remake, except it never did. You can still play the game to this day. You can play the game just fine. People like to say, but it looks old. Yeah, and it was HD for its time. What's the point? I don't see the issue there. Some people say, but for some, the barrier of entry is the gameplay. That means they don't like the game. It's simple as that. If you want a game to be remade because you want to completely change the genre, that means you don't care for the game in question. You cared for a hypothetical different game, like Resident Evil 2 to Resident Evil 2 Remake. Those are like two completely different beasts. Final Fantasy VII Remake isn't even a remake of Final Fantasy VII. Those are two completely different beasts, but they're so different they can't really say they're the same game. Especially Final Fantasy VII Remake. They're not the same game as the original Final Fantasy VII. So that's more of a, you just wish the game was something different. It didn't really need a remake. That's a want. So it's like how I want Final Fantasy V 3D Remake, and I like how Final Fantasy IV 3D Remake was. Final Fantasy V doesn't need a remake. It holds up great. Even back to the SNES version, it holds up great. But I just want a remake because I like how the presentation, the voice acting, everything from Final Fantasy IV 3D Remake was. On top of Final Fantasy IV 3D Remake having its own unique quirks, like a little summon white, or a little extra abilities you could put to characters. But that's me wanting something. Now we have the one where it comes to the idea of if a later entry in a franchise changes things up, that people want the earlier entries to be like that. Well, for example, back to Resident Evil, how there are some people who, despite Resident Evil 1 Remake being a fantastic remake, one of the models of a remake, there are people who wish it played more like Resident Evil 4. You know, how Resident Evil 2 and 3 Remake got remade to play like Resident Evil 4. But for some people, it's like, why? It's already great as is. At that point, feels like you just want Resident Evil 1 to be something else entirely. I think some people want Resident Evil 1 to get remade to Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil 7 already feels like a hypothetical, like, spiritual successor of Resident Evil 1, but in the sense of just being first person. So why would you want Resident Evil 1 to basically just become that? Kind of becomes redundant in that aspect. It just feels weird. It's just like this game needs to switch genres. Or a different example, Devil May Cry. I've seen people say that Devil May Cry 1 should get remade to make Devil May Cry 3, and it's like, why? Devil May Cry 1 was like a fascinating beast of how it was made, how it came to be, how it's gonna be, was originally gonna be Resident Evil 4, then it became its own thing. You can still see a Resident Evil influence in the game and everything. But people prefer, like, I want to play Resident Evil, I want to play like Devil May Cry 3. Okay, but why though? It doesn't need to do that. That's you wanting it to do that. The game plays fine. The game plays great as is, but that's why change it? It's already good as is. That's you wanting it. Doesn't need a remake. People say, but it's too old. Yeah. So what's the point? Are you not making the game on its level? Are you trying to see the game from the lens that came many years after the fact? What is this? You also have, for example, let's say a case like Persona 3, where there are several versions of Persona 3 that people want to remake to combine all those things together. Persona 3 Reload did not do that, but some people wish it did that, wish it could just combine everything all together, and therefore it quote-unquote needed a remake. It did not need a remake at all. Either the versions were fine as is. You just wanted one copy of the game that had everything in it, which again, that's a want, not something that needed a remake. So I don't get that logic either. So, but the fact, that's also the idea of you wanting a game to basically make the other versions redundant, which is also the thing that many people do. That many people want a remake that basically is the definitive version that makes the original redundant, and then pretty much people want it to be original. It's like how people wish they could just get rid of Final Fantasy VII and just embrace Final Fantasy VII Remake. But since VII Remake's not a remake and requires Final Fantasy VII knowledge, you can't do that. Or all people kind of feel like Resident Evil 2, the original, basically doesn't need to be a thing because Resident Evil 2 Remake exists. But then the OG fans of Resident Evil 2 are like, no, Resident Evil 2 is great, it's fantastic. Why would you want Resident Evil 2 not exist? So there are also that one other thing, which people think that the original shouldn't exist. We also have issue with, so please do get a remake, but the remake's not to what people also want. Like Metal Gear Solid 1 to Metal Gear Solid 1 the Twin Snakes. With Twin Snakes, the remake Metal Gear Solid 1 the GameCube, that basically, I won't say tries this thing where it follows the plot beats everything in Resident Evil Solid 1, but then it also does things a bit differently, whether it be incorporating mechanics from Metal Gear Solid 2, or it also has different cutting choreography because the developers are told, try and make this more different than Metal Gear Solid 1. Make this your own unique spin on Metal Gear Solid 1. And I felt it actually worked pretty well. That's the first version of Metal Gear Solid 1 I played. But I know OG fans hate it, whether it be they hate the re-recorded dialogue, even though it's mostly the same actors and some of the things got fixed, like the fact that Mei Ling was supposed to have her accent in the OG. Or people cite how, oh, they made the gameplay too easy, even though the OG MGS1 had like piss easy boss fights except for like Metal Gear Rex. So it's a whole entire issue. People hate that remake. It got a remake, and some people want they should remake it again. But it's like, you already got a remake. And if you did get a remake, what's to say it won't just be another radically different remake? Which is another issue. Some people wish a remake got either more different or be one-to-one. But some people feel like a one-to-one remake feels kind of redundant kind of thing because it's going to do the exact same thing again, then why bother? But if it gets too different, then some people feel like that means it's not a remake and it's basically its own creation, might as well just be its own thing. Which, honestly, nowadays, people prefer. People nowadays are sick of remakes. They kind of prefer it if remakes were just entirely new entries or just different games entirely, because it kind of feels like just being nostalgia. I know some people like to say you prefer the OG version of a game because nostalgia. No, the point of a remake is nostalgia. The point of Persona 3 Reload is because you like Persona 3. The point of Resident Evil 2 Remake is because you like Resident Evil 2. It's not just the idea of this is for someone who didn't like the OG. It's also for the OG person to get on board. You got Resident Evil 4 Remake. Resident Evil 4 need a remake? Hell no! But Resident Evil 4 got a remake. And that's been nostalgia. And then you have the fact that Resident Evil 4 Remake did something different. Like, they didn't have the core dialogue from the OG. But people are like, oh, why didn't that core dialogue? Kind of ruined it. Well, you can play the original. They don't want to play the original. They want to play the remake. Which is another problem. People who pretty much only play one or the other. Or feel like there has to be one or the other, when we can have both. Resident Evil 4 is a 4 Remake. We can have both. It's like how when Sonic freaking had the Sonic Origins collection, and Sega decided to just delist the classic Sonic games that were already on Steam. Like, why? They tried to do the same thing with Sonic Generations. They tried to delist it when freaking they're announcing Sonic XL Generations, but because of backlash, they decided to just put it as part of a bundle, so now it costs more if you get Sonic Generations. But the fact of, that's another issue. Why are some companies just delisting the OGs of a game is when they make a new one? Hell, some of those games will be remade, some of those were just ports or remasters, but the OGs just get wiped from existence. That's what some people have. The issue of also, if you title the remake the exact same thing as the original, it feels like you're trying to like overwrite the original. You're trying to take the place. Resident Evil 2 Remake, it's me calling it Resident Evil 2 Remake. It's just called Resident Evil 2. Is it trying to erase the Resident Evil 2? I want to say no, because GOG has been porting Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 OG on PC. So I want to say they don't want to feel like it erases the original. It's Resident Evil 4 Remake. Like, it's one of those worries about remakes. Would it just erase the original? Was the remakes worse? Was the remakes whatever? Like, I've seen people who want Ocarina of Time to get remade. The favorite game ever. But their reason for a remake is either because it looks old, even also I got a remake on 3DS, but it looks old, or because they'd rather play Breath of the Wild. If I see someone tell me they want Ocarina of Time to play Breath of the Wild, I'ma look at you and go, oh, you don't want Ocarina of Time. You want Breath of the Wild time. And that's not what I'm all for about. I like Breath of the Wild, I like Tears of the Kingdom, but like Ocarina of Time as is. I don't even think I need a remake. Hell, I didn't even think I needed a 3DS remake, but some people felt like it did, because for them, either the game's too old, or they felt there's too many issues preventing them, and there's a barrier. The barrier is in your mind when it comes to an older title. That is you trying to either, one, you don't dig with genre, which is fine, but trying to get to be entirely different is basically you don't like the game, you want something entirely different. Or people who say, try to that barrier of, but what about the story of the game if you want to enjoy? Then enjoy the story through another way. But if you don't like the game, then you don't like the game. You don't like Final Fantasy VII's turn-based RPG, then you don't like Final Fantasy VII. Like, what is this? Like, imagine telling a movie that, hey, this movie is a nice action movie, but it'd be better if it were like a 3D IMAX comedy. Would that be the same movie at that point? No. It would not be. Some people try this weird thing where Video games, gameplay is a part of the medium. Gameplay is the most important part. For some people, they feel like it can be interchanged or removed because to them, all that matters is the story. But no, what matters is the gameplay and how it interacts, how the medium works. Like, for example, The World Ends With You. The World Ends With You on DS. Unique gameplay style. But when it got ported to iOS and Switch, the gameplay had to be changed because of a different platform. People will say that, oh, it doesn't play the same. But for some people, they'll be like, oh, it's the same story, so what's the issue? The issue is the game played uniquely, had a unique play style, but now it's gone, which is also an issue people don't think about. A game that gets released on a certain platform, and let's say the Wii or the freaking DS, the 3DS, and then it's to have some sort of gimmick, like dual screen gimmick, either removed or try to be overhauled. Suddenly the main mechanic and coolness of the game becomes a barrier. And for some people, they'd rather just strip the uniqueness. And it's kind of one of those weird aspects when it comes to remakes and porting things. Stripping things of what they are. Like, I like Persona 3 Reload. I like it a lot. But I know some people don't like it or have issues because of some of the things it removed from OGP3. And I fully understand that. I just wish y'all played that same logic to Persona 4 Go, Persona 5 Royal. But I get the feeling. I know it feels like if someone says they want Ocarina Tiny like Breath of the Wild. I get what you mean. I know what you mean. I wouldn't want that. But I know many people would want that. But I wouldn't. And I get what you mean. I know what you mean when you want a don't scare of a remake. I know what people mean when they have fatigue of remakes and feels like new ideas are being squandered for just old idea, but maybe slightly different. I know some people like some of the remake projects narratives because of how different they're being from the OG. Okay, correction. How different Remake try to be from the OG, and then Rebirth backpedal super hard. But freaking, I get the idea. Something like a one-to-one remake. My ideal remake is Resident Evil 1 Remake, where it's like, hey, we kept the majority of the game the same, but we add this whole new thing, some new locations, or ooh, we're expanding on Lisa Trevor as a character and as an entity. Ooh, stuff like that. That's pretty cool. But many people, they also either, no, it must be strictly the same, like Metal Gear Solid 1 Remake, where people want MGS1 Remake that's exactly the same as MGS1, no over-the-top animations, even though I question, are you a fan of Metal Gear? You think the over-the-topness Twin Snakes is ridiculous? And freaking, some people want something radically different. Some people want a specific remake. Hell, some people don't want that. Some people want a reboot. Some people want DMC Devil May Cry. That's a reboot entirely. That's entirely a different subject, but some people think that's too different. But either way, that's the main point. Does a game need a remake? No. The thing that very much blames one remake is what you want. And wanting something is not wrong. It's just a question of what you're wanting is actually the game remade. And let's say someone wants one remake, or someone who wants something totally different because they don't like the game as is. So it's based on just one. And then there comes the question of, well, if it's one-to-one remake, then does it even need to happen? Or if it's radically different, then is it even a remake at that point? It's a complex subject entirely. But hey, we're in remake hell nowadays, so maybe we probably get more remakes of stuff nowadays. Although, like, speaking, at this point, because I'm more in favor of just something new entirely. But I said, I still have the one Womps Final Fantasy V Remake, but I also want World of Final Fantasy 2. I also want Stranger of Paradise 2. So, could I also prefer a new entry be made? I just want Final Fantasy V Remake. Final Fantasy 4 Remake was so cool, and then they just skipped it to not make Final Fantasy VII Remake, and then people gaslit themselves as if pretending they didn't want Final Fantasy VII Remake, even though for years they wanted Final Fantasy VII Remake. So, complicated subject, could go either way. By the way, something doesn't need a remake, something isn't owed a remake just because it exists, or because it's old. At that point, everything's gonna get remade at some point because of, well, it's old. Like, we don't even treat this kind of way for even films or books for it to be remade for a modern audience. Like, sometimes the modern audience just needs to see things from the perspective of when it came out. You can watch an old movie or read an old book, you can play an old game. Like, this isn't some weird thing where something is actively slapping a game out of your hands kind of thing.